Patrick Haggerty here, Basin Youth for Christ. We're in John chapter 6, and we just finished speaking about Jesus' miracle of feeding the 5,000. And when he had finished feeding the 5,000, there's this miracle that also occurs in the sense that there's leftovers, enough for each of the disciples to have an entire basket full. So the disciples have had this enormous revelation of God's provision and his power to do the miraculous. But the Bible tells us Jesus asks the disciples he sends them on ahead of himself when he goes up on a mountainside to pray. And the disciples are out on the boat by themselves in the middle of the lake, the Sea of Galilee, and a huge storm arises, and they're afraid they're going to drown. And it's the middle of the night. We'll pick up the story here. John chapter 6. Verse 17, they got into a boat and they set off across the lake for Capernaum. Now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. And when they rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water. And they were frightened. You would be too. I'm sure I would have been. Middle of the night, you just see some figure out there walking on the water. That's impossible. But he said to them, "It is I," or "I am. Do not be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. And this verse and this particular section of the Bible reminds me of this truth. First of all, in the storms of our life, man, sometimes it feels like we're drowning. We're convinced we're not going to make it. That if God doesn't intervene somehow, we're going down. And that's where the disciples were. But you know what? In the midst of the storms and the seasons of our life, God sees us. He hasn't abandoned us. He hasn't forsaken to us. And I have found in my life that even during the most stormy parts of my life, that when I call out to the Lord and I just say, "Jesus, come quick. I'm drowning." Guess who comes? Right in the middle of my storm. Right in the middle of my mess. Guess who comes walking? Walking on the water. And you know what happens? When I invite him into the boat, even in the midst of the storm, he calms it. I find every single time that Jesus calms my storms, and he'll calm your storms too. He wants to. He comes to you. He'll come. Just call, and he'll come. Invite him into the boat. Invite him into the mess, and he will. And he'll calm it, and he'll give you the power and the strength to see you through until you reach the other side of that season, that stormy season that you're in. And that's my encouragement to us today. Man, that we would just call out to Jesus in the midst of the storms of life and trust that he will come walking on the water. Invite him in the boat, man. Journey through the storm with Jesus in the boat, and we'll reach the other side safe and sound. May the Lord bless you.